Tonight I'll be informing you about one specific theory of dreams, Jungian dream theory, which is based on the theories of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. First, I'll give you a brief background of Jung's life and work. Second, I'll look at the language of dreams according to Jungian dream theory. And third, I'll look at the overarching function of dreams according to Jung. First, let me tell you a little bit about Carl Jung and the way he came to his theory of dreams. Jung was born in Switzerland in 1875 and died in 1961. In the interim, according to Wikipedia, he was a psychiatrist and psychotherapist who founded analytical psychology, proposed and developed the concepts of extroversion and introversion, archetypes, and the collective unconscious, among other things. For our purposes, one of the most important things to know about Jung was that he was a friend, colleague, and protege of Sigmund Freud, the groundbreaking Austrian physician and psychiatrist known as the father of modern psychology, who, among other things, developed a modern interpretive theory of dreams, calling dreams the royal road to the unconscious. Jung retained much of Freud's thought, but he also eventually diverged to a significant degree from Freud, both personally and professionally. For instance, according to Danish psychotherapist Ole Vedvelt in his book The Dimensions of Dreams, Jung and Freud differed in their view of the unconscious and its relationship to consciousness. For Freud, according to Vedvelt, the unconscious was largely a chaotic mass of drives and bodily excitations, primarily sexual and incestuous, whereas Jung came to think of the unconscious as independent and essentially creative. Where Freud saw dreams as coded language meant to disguise difficult or dangerous thoughts or wishes, often rooted in childhood, Jung was more optimistic. He began to see dreams as creative, purposeful, and forward-oriented. These are a few of the very basic facts about Jung's life and his work on dreams. For my second point, I want to look at the language of dreams as described by Jung. For Jung, dreams are a unique symbolic language. As with any language, dream symbols point to something other than themselves. According to Rebecca Reams, professor of public speaking at American River College, symbols are arbitrary, abstract, and ambiguous. Jung might argue that dream symbols are not in fact arbitrary, but dreams do seem to be especially abstract and ambiguous, individual symbols often carrying within them a constellation or cluster of meanings and associations. Many dreams are personal, that is, the product of the individual's personal unconscious. This was part of Jung's formulation. Therefore, according to Vedvelt, it's very important to establish the context for each separate element in a dream, as well as the dreamer's own associations for the images and circumstances of the dream. So the dream dictionary idea is a little bit suspect to some degree. But at the same time, Jung also identified four generally universal parts of the personal psyche, both conscious and unconscious: the ego, the persona, the shadow, and the anima or animus. The ego is that which we think of as I, both in waking life and in dreams. The persona, according to psychotherapist Margot Born in her book 7 Ways to Look at a Dream, is the face we prepare to meet the world with. And you could have multiple personas. You could have a persona with your parents and different personas with your friends, etc. The shadow, according to American psychiatrist and Jungian analyst James A. Hall in his book Jungian Dream Interpretation, is an unconscious part of the personality characterized by traits and attitudes, whether negative or positive, which the conscious ego tends to reject or ignore. So it's those parts of you that you're not aware of, that you've kind of put down, so to speak. You can have multiple shadows, and according to Born, they show up in dreams as opposites or negatives of the qualities that we claim for ourselves, that is, our egos. In many cases, according to Jungian dream theory, the individual shadow may actually represent qualities that need to be integrated into the personality to a greater or lesser degree. They're not always evil shadows. They contain something that we need to bring into our lives. The anima, if you are male, or the animus, if you are female, is a character of the opposite sex from the dreamer. According to Born, the anima or animus may be thought of as a special case of the shadow. It is the so-called feminine part of a masculine personality and the masculine part of a feminine personality. As with the other archetypes, the anima and animus are sometimes appear in myth, fairy tales, and religions. An example from myth might include Luke and Leia from Star Wars, Together and individually, they represent the cohesion of anima and animus, of so-called masculine and feminine traits, and thus the balance and the force. Okay. Besides the personal unconscious, Jung also postulated the idea of the collective unconscious, or what we now call the objective psyche. And the objective psyche is an apparently universal structure in mankind, just like we all have ears, we all have arms. Well, generally speaking, most of us do. An apparently universal structure that tends to generate archetypes. And archetypes are symbols, patterns, or motifs which tend to be relatively universal across time and cultures, and which, according to Hall, emerge in individuals through dreams and visions. The anima and the animus are sometimes called archetypes, while perhaps the most important and influential dream archetype is the self, and that's with a capital S, okay? The self, according to Hall, is the regulating center of the individual psyche, encompassing even the ego, which is limited in awareness, and the self may appear in dreams as symbols of balance, such as a mandala, or in culture, in symbols such as the Christian cross or the Chinese yin-yang symbol. It's also important to note that individual dream symbols can be either more or less objective, that is, dealing with events and circumstances in the outer world, or subjective, that is, dealing with the dreamer's inner life, or his or her intrapsychic tendencies. So for instance, according to Hall, people in dreams can sometimes represent an actual person in the real world, or they could represent an aspect of the dreamer's own psyche. So if I was to dream about my father or something, it could be that it's a part, he represents part of something about him represents part of me. Okay, now that we've looked at a few of the features of Jung's theory of dream language, I'd like to turn to my third point, some of the overarching functions of dreams according to Jung. Specifically, that dreams are interpretable and meaningful. According to Jung, dreams are interpretable with proper training and guidance. Though Hall adds that it is important never to feel that the dream has been exhausted, as a dream's meaning may be modified in the light of subsequent dreams, for dream interpretation involves a continuing dialogue between the ego and the unconscious. The second point is that dreams are compensatory, and this means, according to Hall, that they serve to compensate for the limited views of the ego. To put this in layman's terms, my ego, what I think of as I, doesn't necessarily see the world as fully as myself might, the large self in my unconscious mind. Okay. Hall adds that such a view is actually in relative harmony with the information processing hypothesis of dreaming, which is often prevalent, but that it expands far beyond mere assimilation of new data. Finally, dreams are a mechanism for what Jung termed individuation. According to Hall, individuation is the actualization of one's unique potentials to whatever extent and in whatever manner is permitted by the vicissitudes of life. While Wikipedia calls individuation a psychological process of integrating the opposites, including the conscious and with the unconscious. And according to Vedfeld, it can facilitate an ordering and balancing function through work with dreams. So to summarize, in Jungian dream theory, dreams are meaningful insofar as they are compensatory in relation to the limited views of the ego, and as they facilitate individuation. Tonight I've talked to you about Jungian dream theory, the theory of dream interpretation developed by Carl Jung, and just so everybody knows, it's J-U-N-G, Jung. I've told you a little bit about his life, some of the specific language of Jungian dream theory, and the overarching function of dreams according to Jung. If I look at my cable TV dream now in Jungian terms, I might have to consider the possibility that it wasn't just a random occurrence. Okay, according to Jung, dreams are meaningful, they're purposeful. I don't know if this includes every single dream you have. I think he made some exceptions. And Jungian dream interpretation can be kind of flexible. But in this case, I think that it could be true. That I might have to think of my dream as not necessarily being about giving up my cable bill, channel. It's, in fact, those details probably serve as symbols for resolving another issue, not that I have issues, okay. Whether external or psychological, remember objective or subjective. As Hall says, as a general rule, if you already know what the dream seems to be saying, then you've missed something. So I'm still thinking about this dream and what it might mean, but it seems to have to do with letting go of something that's holding me back, whether practical or psychological, and doing that to as great a degree as possible. And who knows